Modern.
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 We're prepping for a voyage.
Modern.
The force of an old-fashioned equals whiskey mass times bitters acceleration.
Why don't you make that a double?
Modern bar cart.
What's shaking, cocktail fans? Welcome to episode 159 of the Modern Bar Cart podcast. I'm your host, Modern Bar Cart CEO Eric Kozlik. Thanks for joining me for this interview episode where we track down the best and brightest minds in the spirits and cocktail world so that we can share their secrets with you. This time around, I'm graced with the presence of beverage industry virtuoso Elayne Duff, who has held mixology and brand management roles with tiny little companies you've probably never heard of, like Diageo and Anheuser-Busch. Elayne is here to share with us an exciting new cane spirit from Belize called Copalli Rum. But before we start talking about sustainable distilling practices, howler monkeys, and sugarcane terroir, let's take a quick pause so that you can make yourself a drink. This episode's featured cocktail is the El Presidente. To make it, you'll need 1.5 ounces of white rum, 1.5 ounces of French vermouth. I'll explain what that means in a second. 1 bar spoon of orange curacao or Grand Marnier. In a pinch, you could use triple sec here. And 1/2 bar spoon of real grenadine, like Pratt Standard's True Grenadine, which you can purchase from our e-commerce store over at modernbarcart.com. Combine these ingredients in a mixing beaker with ice, stir for about 20 seconds until they're well chilled and integrated, then strain into a stemmed cocktail glass and garnish with an orange twist. One of the cool things about the El Presidente is that it resembles so many of the classic stirred cocktails that reigned supreme before and during Prohibition, especially in places outside of the US where foreign ingredients remained widely available. But it's a surprisingly tricky drink to balance. The key, it seems, is to use the right vermouth. David Wondrich, who comes up later in this episode, writes that most people who think of French-style vermouth, the kind stipulated in the early recipes for the El Presidente, think of dry white vermouth that's often used in martinis. However, there is a different style called vermouth de Chambry, spelled Chambéry, or blanc vermouth. And this is both sweeter and more full-bodied than the classic dry style, which is certainly what you need to use in the El Presidente. House Dolin carries a delicious and affordable bottle of this white vermouth, and I believe Martini and Rossi also launched one in the past couple years, so you have a few options on most liquor store shelves. Now, when it comes to rum, it's important to note here that the El Presidente was popularized in Cuba, which has a very unique rum-making tradition that differs significantly from other places in the Caribbean. But if you can't faithfully source Cuban rum, don't despair. Simply look for a white rum that has good body, something luscious, juicy, and maybe a little funky. And this might require you to change the way you think slightly because, in my opinion, most Americans associate body in spirits with barrel aging or with certain types of grain-based mash bills. But if you're able to kick that habit, maybe revise your thinking against that notion, and seek out a bottle of unaged cane spirits with a little bit of attitude, like the Copalli Rum we taste during this interview, I think you'll be completely hooked. So, now that you've got another classic cocktail to add to your repertoire, let's turn our attention back to the interview. In this conversation with Copalli Rum Global Brand Ambassador Elayne Duff, some of the topics we discuss include the story of Copalli Rum as a philanthropic project by marine conservationist Todd Robinson, and how he teamed up with Chef Anya Fernald to create Copal Tree Lodge. How Elayne and her fellow global brand ambassador, Julie Reiner, are educating bartenders and home consumers about the magic of Copalli Rum here in the US. Which cane varietals, fermentation decisions, and sustainable distilling practices influence the flavor of Copalli Rum, both the white and barrel-rested varieties. Some thoughts on the perfect daiquiri and how you can modulate the booze and sugar in the drink to achieve the ideal wash line and flavor profile for you. A cautionary tale about the utter folly of comparing spirits aged in different climates, why I think we need to coin the term monkey's share, and much, much more. Elayne is a wealth of knowledge, and the samples of Copalli Rum we taste during this interview are super exciting, especially at such an affordable price point. So if you happen to live in one of the states where Copalli is available, I hope you'll request it at your favorite rum bar or liquor store. You can learn more about Elayne and what she's up to by visiting duffontherocks.com, tuning into her weekly beverage news podcast, The Industry Distilled, or by following her on Instagram at duffontherocks. One quick correction before we dive in. Early on in the interview, I make a mistake by saying that the Clover Club bar in New York has closed. It is not. I was thinking of the Pegu Club bar, which is closed, so please pardon the mistake. And with that, it's my pleasure to present this excellent tasting and interview with everyone's favorite spirits guru, Elayne Duff. Elayne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I'll be honest, me too. So why don't we just start off by giving folks a little bit about who you are and what you do, because you have a pretty extensive bio in this space. So why don't you just give us the highlights?
I'll try to keep it short. So I've been in the business for over 20 years. So the spirits business. I worked for the two largest drinks company in the world. I worked for Diageo for about 17 years of my career. So the majority of my career, I worked from various positions, from working on events to launching brands to becoming their first ever luxury spirits brand ambassador for the country, as well as their first ever mixologist, like their corporate mixologist. Did that for almost, I think it was like 13 or 14 of those 17 years working for them. Which was amazing. Took me around the globe and got me on TV quite a few times. And, I then took a dip into the beer world. I went over to the beer industry. I got recruited by Anheuser-Busch, who created a new startup division called ZX Ventures, and they thought they were going to revolutionize the craft beer industry. So I did that for about 3 years. I did not enjoy it, but learned a lot. And then I started my own company. So now I have Duff on the Rocks. And Duff on the Rocks, we focus on strategy, sales, and education for brands.
Totally,
and I have a podcast.
Yes. Tell us about the podcast, because this was news to me.
So I have a podcast called The Industry Distilled. It's with myself and Jason Luttrell. And I love audiobooks. And I just said to myself one day, it would be so great if somebody just summed up all the industry news and I could listen to it on audio. So I realized I'm just going to have to do it. So I started reading all the industry news, and we consolidate it down to 5 to 10 stories that we think are really relevant from the week before and what you should be aware of. And then it's called The Industry Distilled, and we give every Friday, you'll see it on all your podcast channels. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I'm actually on the newsletter for that, so I was aware of it. I just didn't realize that it was you and Jason. Okay, that's awesome. So now, not only is it in my queue, it's going to be the next thing I listen to. So that's fantastic. So we're here to talk about kind of a cool project, which is a new rum brand that we're bringing to market here, specifically you and Julie Reiner. And it's called Copalli Rum. So why don't you just give us a little bit of the background on Copalli, and I guess we'll go from there. Yeah,
it's interesting. When this project came to me, I looked at the rum, and as being in this business for a long time, I had the pleasure of being picky. I'd be I won't work on every brand if I don't believe in it and how it's produced, or their policies about sustainability or about diversity. And when Copalli was first presented to me, I was like, wow, this is incredible. This company not only uses sustainable practices with their zero impact distillery, they are all about giving back to the Belizian community. That's their biggest belief. The owner, Todd Robinson, is all about the Belizians and giving back and helping them. And thankfully, the liquid's also great as well. So, just using 3 ingredients. So I was like, thank goodness. Whew. Just using, I know sugarcane, yeast, and water. I mean, it really is just a delicious rum. And then getting to work with Julie Reiner, who's been a dear friend of mine for years. As we all know, she's an amazing mixologist and, bar operator. and I'm excited to work with her. So we both called each other up, and I was like, yeah, this is amazing. So we both love the rum. We both love working together. So far it's been fantastic. Great partnership. Really balance each other out.
Yeah, and for our listeners who aren't maybe familiar with Julie Reiner, she's obviously super famous in New York for bars like the Clover Club and a number of other projects. That one unfortunately had to close recently, but that's sort of par for the course right now with a lot of places in major metro areas. But
I correct you one thing. Sorry, I'm just going to correct. It's Flatiron Lounge that closed.
So, oh, really?
Flatiron Lounge, which was with Audrey Saunders, that closed. They made an announcement a few months back, and their lease was coming up. But Clover Club still alive and well.
Jeez. Well, good.
Clover Club's still alive and well. She's doing tons of to-go cocktails, and she's working her tail off, keeping that place in business. And they have an outdoor location. They're doing what everybody in New York is, which is scrambling, and they have outdoor space. And then they have Leyenda across the street, which she does with Ivy Mix. So yeah, no, Julie is fantastic, and she knows so much about rum. I'm actually learning some stuff from her because her mixology. I'm a good mixologist. Julie Reiner is an amazing mixologist, and she really loves rum. It's been her passion for a long time. So tiki drinks or her Hawaiian style drink, because she's from Hawaii, is her thing. So it's been a great collaboration between the two of us.
For sure. So moral of the story, don't let a DC guy tell you anything about the New York cocktail scene, because I'll probably tell you the wrong thing.
Hey.
So global brand ambassadors. So you are sort of like splitting up the responsibilities of taking this rum brand to the world. Is there some sort of division of labor? Is she focusing more on tiki drinks and you're focusing more on other aspects? Like what does it look like when you two kind of split up the responsibilities of getting this on people's radar?
It's an interesting question because it's not our full-time job. Obviously, we both have our own companies. I have my own company. She has hers, and definitely with COVID happening, it really is a really smaller part-time role because we can only do so much. As hopefully things go back at some point, we'll be at trade shows, speaking at trade shows together. We'll be doing bartender initiatives. We'll be doing guest bartending shifts. We'll be doing a lot more education live. So for now, the division of labor is, sometimes it's cocktails. Like today, right now, Julie is shooting cocktails at her bar. With the photographer, because she was like, Elayne, I can do this banging it, with my team here, 2 hours at the bar, no need for you to like risk coming on a subway and whatever. So she's doing that while I'm doing this. So it's like there's a divide of education sometimes about we have an Instagram story coming out about all things rum and rum 101 facts. So I took those on, where Julie took on the story of doing more like garnishes. So we kind of divide like where our strengths are and information. I'm a little bit more of a nerd when it comes to facts, and she's more of a expert when it comes to cocktails. So it's like the two of us together balance each other out.
That's fantastic. It's great to have a solid partner in the initiative. And, there's a lot to talk about with Copalli, which I should probably just give folks the spelling right now, because I actually misspelled it the first time I sent an email. It's Copalli, 2 L's and an I at the end.
Yep.
And I think this might be a good time to ask about something called the Copal Tree, or the Copal Tree.
Yes, so the Copal Tree is native to Belize and is what the brand is named after. That's kind of it. It's not a really long story. It's just that this is it's a tree. It grows in Belize, so they wanted to stay true to their roots. They wanted to obviously to have the brand tied back to the Belize itself. So the actual rum is distilled on Copal Tree Farm, right? So that's where the Copal tree grows. And within it, there's also the Copalli canopy. Sorry, I'm going to say this. I want to make sure I say this correctly, because there is the Copal Tree Lodge. And in this lodge, if you don't mind, I'll tell the story.
Please.
Okay, so the way this brand came about was in 2005. So there's a gentleman named, he's the co-founder of the Copalli Rum Distillery. His name is Todd Robinson. And Todd happens to be a marine conservatist. He's very much about marine life. And he spent much of his adult life basically working to support efforts to preserve the Belizian barrier reef, right? So he really loves, everything I've heard about him, he loves Belize, he loves Belizean people. So he bought the Copal Tree Lodge. So it already existed, but he bought it and he bought all the surrounding area around it. And then he partnered up with a restaurateur named Anya Fernald. I'm going to pronounce her name correctly. Anya Fernald, who happens to be a restaurateur. She owns a restaurant called Balcampo, and he wanted to be able to grow the food to sustain the restaurant on the property itself. So she came in to help set that up, and they also wanted to be able to provide the rum for the bar, right? So one thing led to another. They really decided that they really loved the idea of making their own rum, and the project kind of exploded. And then they decided to create a sustainable distillery right there next to the farm. And then Copalli Rum was born. So there you go.
That's fantastic.
It's basically, It's like all a good effort, keep things sustainable, to support the people around them. And they produce an entire distillery. And it's been producing rum since 2018.
Wow, that is awesome. So they've had, I like this, I'd like to understand the timeline of these sorts of things because it tells you a lot about things like a go-to-market strategy, right? Well, they've been making it since 2018. That means they've had a couple of years to get their process down to really, make sure that the workflow can sustain scale and also make sure that the sustainability initiatives are actually sustainable. So I like to hear that. I like to hear that it's not just like a bam, within 6 months, we're trying to push this everywhere in the world. And, another thing that's interesting to me about the idea of the Copal Tree Lodge is that it seems like a really vertically integrated situation where you've got this this property, this hospitality place where I'm assuming tourists come to visit here, and then they get to stay. They can enjoy not only the accommodations and the food, but also the rainforest and all the great touristy stuff that you can do there. And then you've got this, this sustainable rum initiative that is also, feeding these people and these restaurants with product. So I love vertically integrated systems. I love sustainable systems. And it just sounds like this is sort of almost the best of both of those worlds. It
really is. The one thing I fell in love with this company is, I've worked with a lot of brands and, I've worked with some of the biggest companies. I have worked for the two biggest companies in the world. And, I don't think many companies don't have this luxury of taking their time. And the only word I get simple, they're not greedy. It is really literally, these are the least greedy people I've ever met. That's not greedy. It's like, I want to call other people greedy. It's more that they just want to do it right. It's like, they're not in a rush. They want to make sure whatever they put into place is the right way of doing it. They want to make sure they are including people. They want to make sure they're giving back. They're not in a rush to make it, to put it out there in the world. Todd Robinson, from what I know, he doesn't like to be on the forefront, but as far as I know, he's an extremely wealthy man and he very much is about giving back. That's all he does. So for him, this is a project of being able to give back to the Belizian community and to produce a delicious rum. And so they really want to do it right, and they're going to do it slowly. And I think that's what Julie and I love about them. We're like, wow, I've never met people like this before who aren't just like sell. They're like, no, let's take our time, do it the right way. So it's very exciting. It's really, really, I really believe in the brand and what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I think that most of our listeners who are somewhat familiar with rum will be familiar with a few different styles. You might be familiar with, of course, the epic Jamaican funky rums. You might be familiar with the Guyanese rums. You might be familiar with rums from Dominica or some of the other islands out there. But Belize, to me, it's not like a big player in the rum space. So I guess my next question is there a Belizian style of rum? And is there, I guess, if there's not, what is the style of Copalli Rum, knowing that cane spirits just offer this vast array of options when it comes to the decisions in the distillation process?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. I mean, rum is there's a lot of different styles out there. And within Belize, the one thing that Todd and Anya found is that Belize has a history of cane growth. So it grows there naturally. They decided to set up a cane farm right there, a sugar cane farm right there on their property itself. So they wanted the style of rum that they're using is they do a type of rum agricole. Now, rum agricole, if it's spelled with RHUM, is a French rum agricole, which is the people they kind of they legally, I don't know if it's legal or they kind of own that domain. So we are a agricole style of rum, which basically means we take the sugar cane, we crush it, we go straight to the juice. We distill only the juice. Where if some other rums, like a more funkier style of rum, like a Jamaican rum, will be using molasses, right? Which is the byproduct after you've made sugar. So for this is more of a rum agricole style. And for those of you listening might not be familiar with what that means. Basically, when you distill just the cane juice, you'll get more notes that are a little more vegetal, they're a little more grassy. It has a little more funk to it. What's different about the cane that they're using, they use two particular types of cane. I think it's a red cane and I'm going to look now. There's two different types because cane, I learned this for the very first time, and so did Julie Reiner, was that you can choose which cane you want to for your rum, and each cane has a different flavor profile, which makes sense, right? It's like, think about like raw materials all have different types of profiles. So for them, they are using a black cane and a red cane. And each one of them has their own unique flavor profile. And they're all about sustaining the flavor or amplifying the flavor of the cane itself and the juice. So they take that cane, specifically that flavor. They tried out multiple different ones. They grow it, they harvest it once a year, crush it, take the juice, ferment it for up to 4 days. And the one thing I found interesting is that they also, they use for like 4 or 6 hours, they use the natural yeast from the cane itself to start the fermentation process because they really want to preserve that flavor. And then they add in commercial yeast because I'm assuming it's because it just speeds up the process and it's more controlled. And then from there, it goes into the stills. And they actually use two different types of stills. They use pot stills, very small pot stills for the rested rum. And then they use a column and a pot for their white rum. So it adds a lot more complexity to it. Sorry, I think we went off.
Oh yeah, no, that's fantastic. That is that's a really cool thing to note. I mean, I've been the first time I was made aware that there are differences in cane flavor profiles was when I interviewed Chase Babcock, who is the driving force behind St. Benevolence Clarin out of Haiti. And he mentioned that there were different cane types that they chose. And I really think that is probably the future for rum, because when we think of sugar, we think of a taste, not a flavor, right? The 5 tastes on the mouth, on the tongue being, we think sweet, sugar, taste. But when we think sugar, we don't always think flavor. And all the subtle aromatic nuances that brings. So that's super interesting. And just as you described the process, another thing that really struck me as a kind of a green flag, not a red flag, whatever the opposite of a red flag is that the fact that they let those native yeasts do their work for a little while, so that they kind of can establish that foothold in the fermentation process before, I guess, they turbocharge it with the commercial yeast to just get the job done. So I really love that. I think it says like, hey, we care about process. We're trying to be efficient here, but we're also going to let the terroir of the surrounding rainforest that they obviously care deeply about penetrate into that product so that we get to taste it and experience it. So yeah, I think that's fantastic.
And it actually adds a little bit because of that cane, those particular canes, and because of they're using natural yeast from Belize, it does have a different flavor. So a lot of rum agricoles, I always say, and I love rum agricoles, they have a little bit more of a funk and like almost like a gasoline. I hate to say like a rubber, kind of like a burnt rubber kind of note to it, which people, if you're not in the rum world, might be like, ew, but it's actually really lovely. This is actually, it works in cocktails, but this is softer. This is like, there's something about the rum. It doesn't have that burnt rubber kind of nose to it. It has more of the grassy, vegetal, and it just, it's just a really pleasant, and it's a little bit sweeter. And I really love it. It really works so well in cocktails. It's a great balance of flavors. Are you smelling some right now?
Yeah, so I've got the white here. I poured myself a taster of the white, and I'm nosing it right now. And I'll be honest, my approach to rums is whenever I can taste the white distillate first, I always do that. And obviously, you just mentioned that there's some production differences between the white and the barrel rested. So we'll get to that when we pour the barrel rested. But as far as the white. The first thing I did when I received these bottles is I popped that white open and took a big old whiff, and it was just an exciting moment because I agree. It's soft. It doesn't have those notes that you would also find in some of like the Islay or Orkney scotches with like you said
iodine.
like the rubber.
They can have like iodine, rubber. It's such an odd tasting note or a nose, but it's so true. It's like that's my description of it. It's like kind of aggressive, but it's lovely.
Yeah.
This is a little bit softer.
One of the things that I get as I nose this is almost like a petrichor smell, which is one of my favorite words to describe a wine or a spirit. And what it means is it's the smell after a rain, especially after a rain on a warm day, where you get it's actually comprised of all the microorganisms and all the stuff that literally is the terroir of wherever you are. Having been to Tales of the Cocktail a bazillion times, I'm sure that you could probably call up a sensory memory of the petrichor from Bourbon Street, which is an awful petrichor. It's not good. But when I smell this, I almost, I'm sitting here looking at this beautiful label with all the foliage from the Copal Tree. I smell this. It's almost like I'm imagining myself in Belize just after a fresh rain, and I've got a bartender mixing me up a daiquiri, and so it is just.
I look forward to. I'm sure,
smell.
like you do. I look forward to traveling one day, and I look forward to actually getting to Belize, to the rainforest. That was the first thing Julie and I were supposed to do, and obviously with COVID we could not. And thinking about, you were saying about after the rain, it rains 200 inches a year in Belize. That is a lot of. That's how they're able to use the canopy water to actually to bring down the proof of the rum itself. So it's actually all using the water from the actual rain that they capture off the canopies, which I thought was pretty.
Do you have any sense? Do you have any sense of how they actually capture that from the canopies?
No. I wish I did. It's a great question, and I'm gonna find. I'm sure somebody does, but I don't know actually. I never asked that question. I just was like, oh, you capture the rain, the water off the canopies. But yeah, no. But I'm gonna find out for you because that is a good one. I'm assuming it's a very well set up process, whatever it is.
In a place where there's 200 inches of rain a year, I don't think it's going to be a big issue. If this was part of Oaxaca where they're struggling to get water, it would be one thing. But I think in a place where it rains that much, they're not going to have any issue being able to proof it down with something natural. So that's great.
All I got was they capture the water that lands on the roof. So basically, as the water kind of comes down, so I do have a little information. So basically, as the water falls, it like flows down the roof, and they put up tanks to capture it off the roof. Because what I've been told is, this is the one thing I really, it's like rain falls in like a deluge. Like it's like, woof, like you don't want to be outside. Like it will hurt. Like it comes down. So literally it hits the roof and then it comes off the roof, and they literally capture it off the roof. Obviously they filter it before it goes into the rum itself, so they don't get any of the bits. But yeah, that's what they do. So it's captured off the roof.
So a couple other details here just from the label. This is 42%. So we've got 84 proof, which I think is nice because, everything on the shelves is, when you go to a liquor store, it's 40, 40, 40, 40. Sometimes I get a 45. Sometimes I get a 50. But 42 is interesting to me because you get just that kiss of heat. And to me, when we're looking at a white rum here, the first thing that comes to mind obviously is a daiquiri, and I'm sort of looking for just that little bit extra in that daiquiri. So with the white rum, I imagine that's probably what you're pushing most, but are there other interesting applications for this? How are people thinking about this and using the flavor profile to create interesting cocktails?
Obviously the daiquiri, right? So we got our classic, which is our favorite. And just, like I asked, doing about the proof, you're right. It's one of the things, it's like I asked our distiller, Ed, I was like, why 42 and why 44 for the age? And he said, that was just the one where they got the most flavor. Like, anything less than that, they weren't getting the full flavor of the rum. So it's just, they distilled to that and they're like, that's what just gave the perfect balance of all the flavor. So for me, it's like interesting. It's like I always start off with any new product. I always start off with the classics, right? So trying in the classics for myself, it's like I tried a daiquiri, and because this is the interesting part. I don't know if you've noticed this, but most consumers have no idea what a daiquiri is. They think of it as the frozen drink they get when they're out. I mean, maybe people listening to this because they're into cocktails might well know, but I meet bartenders. I mean, that's how I actually started testing bartenders. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, I'm testing bartenders. But if I sit at a new bar and I'm not sure, when I used to be able to sit at a bar, and I wasn't sure, like, how the bar, how do they operate? Like, were they making good drinks? I would ask them if they could make me a daiquiri. And if the first question was, and believe me, this happens more than not, I don't have a blender, then I know I just get a beer and a shot. And I was shocked of how many bartenders that I met. Not, obviously people working at hardcore mixology bars, but regular bartenders who just were never taught the daiquiri. And it's such a simple cocktail. So I'm hoping it's one, as it was one that we talked about with Copalli. I was like, I think we should really capture this and really talk about it a lot. Like, what goes into a daiquiri? Like, it's generally 2 ounces of white rum, right? Some people make it higher. They put 3 ounces and make a really boozy white, but I use 2 ounces of white rum, half an ounce of rich simple syrup, which is basically, as 2 times the amount of sugar than water, and then 1 ounce of lime juice, right? So that's just my classic formula. So 2, 1, half. It's so simple, shaken, served up. In the summertime, though, I do like to serve it over like 1 ice cube. And I did a little twist. I love I like drinks spicy. So I actually threw in a jalapeno, shook it up with a jalapeno. If the jalapeno is not that hot, I actually crush mine and then shake it up and then just serve it over either up or over ice. And I just love it. It's fantastic.
Nice.
And with the aged one, I made a Negroni. Because it just, I was like, it didn't really work for an old fashioned. And I love Negronis. And so I was like, I made a Negroni, but I found there's a nice like vanilla note, I guess, from the barrels. And I really wanted to enhance that. And it has like almost like a cacao note to it. So I just put a little dash of chocolate bitters. So it just really, it just like a Scrappy's chocolate bitters, like 2 dashes, it really enhances that flavor of that chocolate, kind of really pops out of that, the aged rum. So those are my 2 favorites so far with the rums that I've been making. I mean, there's lots. I mean, I'm looking forward this month. That's all I'm doing is making cocktails.
Oh, rats. One of those months.
Yeah.
So a quick note to my listeners. One of the points that Elayne made about the daiquiri formulation is actually really cool. So let's say you're at home, you've got a coupe glass, and let's say you make your daiquiri and it goes right to the top and it's a little bit uncomfortable to like, it's almost sloshing over. That the amount of simple syrup that you use relative to whether it is a simple like a 1-to-1 or a rich simple 2-to-1 can actually have a big impact on where the wash line sits. So usually when I do a daiquiri recipe, I'll go something like 2 ounces and then 3/4 of lime, 3/4 of a regular simple. Or an ounce of lime and an ounce of regular simple. But I love that you have this option with the daiquiri to just decrease the amount of water or double the amount of sugar relative to the water in that simple syrup. And just that little bit can really affect that wash line. So if you're at home and you're really trying to perfect a daiquiri, think about the concentration of your simple syrup And that could really actually make a big difference in your wash line. So that's my little hack of the day based on Elayne's awesome formulation. And I actually have a bunch of hot peppers growing right outside the window here behind me. So I might have to pick a couple of jalapenos later today and give that a try.
And just a type, because or else it overwhelms the rum. It's just like a slight, like one, if they're really hot, I only put like a half of jalapeno. If it's not, then it's like a full, like with the seeds. So you don't want it to overwhelm the rum. And yeah, the rich simple syrup thing, it's not something in America that we use so much. It's something that European bartenders use all the time. It's like their natural go-to. They only use rich simple syrup. And I understood. I was like, yeah, for your wash line. Exactly. That's such a great point, because I would find my cocktails were too big. And I was like, if I just reduced the sugar, but that still got the concentration of flavor by making a rich simple syrup, it made it all the better. And then you can also, for the listeners, you can also see, like, maybe you like your daiquiris a little drier. If your rum's a little sweeter, so then just do a 1/4 ounce of rich simple syrups. Leave the lime juice. Just play with your acidity and your rum, but never take down the rum. It's definitely 2 to 3 ounces. Just always is the best way of doing it.
Yeah. Last thing on rums and daiquiris and the like, I would highly recommend to anybody who's interested in the intricacies or nuances of the daiquiri, check out an article that Dave Wondrich wrote for the Daily Beast called "Plato and Aristotle Walk into a Bar." It's this wonderful, wonderful analysis of the caipirinha and the daiquiri and the tea punch cocktails, like through the lens of the cultures where they came from. And basically he has like this really cool distinction between a Platonic approach to cocktails and an Aristotelian approach to cocktails. And we have a little summary of that. So I'll link to that in the show notes for this episode over at modernbarcart.com/podcast. So you can check out that article and then the little review that we did of it. But that's probably the most interesting article that I've read about cocktails in the past year. So I highly recommend
that. Sounds good. I haven't even seen that one. I love the Daily Beast and I read that all the time. I just love Dave Wondrich because if you want to know anything about his history, just Dave Wondrich, just verify it through Dave to make sure it's true. Whenever you Google anything, I just Google Dave Wondrich and a historic fact. And I'm like, if Dave didn't say it's true, then it might not be.
Right. So I've got the barrel aged rum here. Could you speak a little bit about that term rested and what that means?
Sure. So basically, it's rested because I guess rested. How do I describe rested? So, this rum is placed in a barrel that used to house Jack Daniels in it. I actually asked the distiller, I said, why, that barrel itself? And they said, why not, an ex-Jim Beam barrel? Because you do see Jack Daniel barrels all around the world. And mostly because they had the most of them, because they're one of the biggest producers of whiskey out there. So everybody was buying them. But the second thing he said, it's not just because they're available. He said it's also because Tennessee whiskey is filtered before it goes into the barrel itself. So to be a Tennessee whiskey, as you know, it has to go through the Lincoln County process, making it a sweeter, lighter style of whiskey. So it doesn't impact the barrel as much. So because they didn't want to pull the whiskey flavor out, they just want to use the whiskey, the barrel itself, pull a little bit of whiskey notes, but more about the vanilla and the coconut you generally get from a whiskey barrel, an American oak barrel. So they rested just means it's just not in there for a very long time. So basically, it is placed in the barrel. They didn't want to pull too much wood. As you know, the warmer an environment is, the more wood you're going to extract in a faster period of time. So they just wanted to add a little more complexity. They wanted to soften out the edges. They wanted to pull some more of that vanilla. And when you smell that, you do get those dry cacao notes and a little bit of vanilla, and just kind of add some nuances to the rum itself. So basically, it's just rested. It's rested between 8 and 10 months. So I think when the term gets past that, it's like when it really starts to get aged, it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It's really deep into the aging process, depending on where you are in the world. If you're in Scotland, it's 15 years. Can be.
Right. And I think that's something that a lot of folks overlook. A good example, I was in New York, I think about a year ago, last June, and I went to the Polynesian and had some lovely cocktails there. And while I was sort of waiting for my friends to finish up their drinks, I said, well, they've got a pretty cool selection of curated rums. Let me try something that's 20 years, or it was 20 or 25 years old, just a little pour. And in the American consciousness, you see these scotches on the shelf with, if it starts with two, it's going to be $100, $200, $300 for a bottle. And, with rums, you get something up to that level. It's not equivalent. You can't just compare a 20-year aged Scotch with a 20-year aged rum. So I think that's why I really wanted to dig into that idea of barrel rested, because the humidity and the intensity of the heat down in Belize, in these countries that are kind of near the equator, it's just doing something completely different than something that's up in Scotland, or even something that's in Kentucky or Tennessee. We get hot weather in Kentucky and Tennessee, but it's still nothing compared to the climate of, Belize or Cuba or Jamaica or any of these rum producing countries. So I would caution people about trying rums that are super aged, because we don't really know what that means. As Americans, we don't really have a concept for it. And I haven't been all that impressed by super hyper aged rums in the past. So I like the idea of resting. I like the idea that you're imparting the barrel notes as opposed to the whiskey notes. Obviously there's some mixing in there, but I think this is beautiful, and I'm definitely pulling out some of those cacao, vanilla, and I get like a peppery backbone here that's really nice.
Yeah, it's a very dry rum. It's because they add nothing else. I mean, a lot of rums add a little bit of sugar at the end. We add nothing, right? So it's just the sugar cane juice, it's just yeast, and it's just water. No extra sugars added. So for an aged rums tend to be can be a little richer. This is a very dry aged rum. So if you're into you don't want a sweet rum, this is like a dry, very dry, like a little bit of vanilla, cacao, a little complexity from the wood. And also the other thing about the heat is the amount of humidity, how much product actually evaporates so much faster. So the evaporation, the angel share is so much more. So they can't let it sit, or else you're in a very controlled, warehouse. So the more it evaporates, the higher concentration of flavors, because the water and the alcohol evaporates, you get a higher concentration of flavors, and the proof goes up. So yeah, there's a lot of things to aging. We could do an entire podcast on it.
For sure. I take it or leave it. You'll probably leave it because I'm not a marketer, but I think maybe you should call it, instead of the angel share, you should call it the Howler Monkey's share, because you've got the Howler Monkey right on the bottom, and he's up in the trees. So as it evaporates, it goes up into the trees, and the Howler Monkey gets a little tipsy.
You're trying to say there's a bunch of drunk Howler Monkeys out there in the world?
I don't know. I haven't been there. I'd have to go and investigate. So maybe once you guys get down there and investigate, you should test out get me down there, and I'll verify.
That sounds good. I like it. I look forward to seeing the drunk Howler Monkeys. Will be even better.
Well, this has been an awesome little tasting. I love when I get to taste two products that kind of share a terroir, especially when I can do an aged versus unaged comparison. I think it really gives me a good sense of the line. Can you tell us a little bit about how the rollout is going here in the U.S.? What states is this rum available in? Where can we expect it to go if all goes according to plan?
So right now, I don't know to be honest with you, I don't know the exact plan. We haven't gotten that far yet, but I do know it's available here in New York. It's definitely here. It's available in Florida, and it is available in Southern California. So I believe, I think we're also available in other countries. I believe the UK and Germany and a few other countries that I definitely know. So it is, right now we're still kind of building out. I don't want to talk out of turn, but for what I know, my involvement is that we are now going to just build awareness of the brand. In the markets that we are in, planning for the future of expanding slowly across the country. And Julie and I are going to be really working with the team to educate people about rum, educating people about rum cocktails, using our platform to bring bartenders from all sorts of backgrounds onto our Instagram lives, so we can give people a platform that might not always have one, which is really important to Julie and I, is be able to use art. We realize we have a platform and Copalli is giving us one. And it's like, wow, we could help other people come onto our platform. So that's their main goal, is just continue the education of rum, continue getting people to love the brand and be able to support the community as much as we can. And what Yeah,
Totally.
So that's our goal. I do know that they are looking at one of the products we didn't talk about here, and I'm getting it tomorrow. I haven't tasted it, but it's the cacao. It's the Copalli cacao, because there's also cacao grown in Belize, so it was a natural fit. So they have Copalli down in Belize, and I heard that a bottle is coming my way tomorrow. So I'm excited to taste that. Yeah.
So is that like an infused rum, or is that a rum liqueur?
No, it's going to be, it's actually not a rum liqueur. It's going to be, I believe, I don't know if the technical term would be infused, but it's definitely going to have fresh cacao within it. So whatever, I don't know the production process just yet, but I'm excited. I think once I get it, then we're going to do a training on it. So that's kind of exciting.
You know what's interesting is I was actually at that same time when I was in New York and went to the Polynesian. I was there for a trade show called the Fancy Food Show, helping out one of my friends who has a shrub brand. And somebody came up to our table talking about cacao. Apparently the pulp...
I actually have the answer.
Oh, go ahead.
So they are introducing, I know they are introducing a new product, which is the Copalli cacao. So they grow organic cacao on the farm, and they've been making chocolate for years. So they infuse the cacao into the column rum. So the column still rum for about 1 week, and then they put it into the pot still, which then is redistilled. So it's actually distilled into the rum itself.
Oh, that is so cool. I imagine that might be messy to clean, but still very, very cool.
Yeah, I believe it is too. But I guess it's like cacao beans, and I guess maybe there's But yeah, so that is the cacao rum, which I'm going to get to taste tomorrow. So I'm very excited.
That is really cool. I had never thought of cacao as a quote unquote botanical in that way before, where you do like an infusion, almost like the French style liqueur thing, where you'll infuse almost like a genepi. You'll infuse, you'll distill, and then you'll reinfuse or something like that. I just love that concept, and I had never thought of cacao as sort of like an option for distilling after infusion. I think that's such a cool and innovative way to do it. So that's very exciting. I'm very, very neat to see that that the line is expanding beyond these two offerings. So that's awesome. We've got 2 products here, a third on the way to kind of build out the Copalli line. Is there anything that you want to tell us besides what we've already gone through before we jump into lightning round questions here? This has been super fun.
So I just wanted to make sure it's like, one of the things I really love about this product, and it's why I'm so excited, and what I think really makes it unique, is the fact that it is a sustainable distillery, and that was their goal from day one. It's like we want to be zero impact. The fact that they are able to reutilize their waste in ways that are good for the environment. So they take the cane after it's crushed, and they burn that, and they take that steam to power the stills. Then they take the byproduct of distillation, and they process it, and they use it as fertilization. The fact that they are all about giving back to the Belizian community. If you go on their website, they'll talk about all the things they're doing for education, educational grants, supporting the schools. Their philanthropy work is incredible. And the fact that it's just 3 ingredients and no extra sugar made, this is things that not everybody, can claim about their own products. So it is, I think, just something really cool and unique. And also, they don't charge a lot. It's a very reasonably priced rum. I believe the white rum here in New York retails for like under $22, which is pretty fantastic. Yeah. So, it's affordable. They're giving back, and it tastes good. So all these things are just a reason why you can feel good about buying the brand, and I feel good about standing behind the brand.
Yeah, I was thinking that this white rum, based on how delicious it is, was going to be, somewhere in the $30 range. So to know that I can go pick up this, it's a beautiful bottle. It looks great on your bar cart. So to be able to pick this up for that amount of money is super exciting, very appealing. And I'd actually, if you're a whiskey drinker or, somebody who's into darker, boozier cocktails, obviously, try out the barrel rested. But if you're a cane person like I am, if you're just interested in cane and the different flavor profiles it can have, I would really recommend the white. I think it's a really beautiful flavor, and I think it fits in a perfect place between those super funky rums and also like the really subtle white rums that are on the market right now. So I think not only does it fill a gap, but it does so with style.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is kind of like the stepping stone to the really funky rums. It's like smack right in the middle. It's a perfect balance. Great way of saying it.
Yeah. So, Elayne, ready for some lightning round questions?
Absolutely.
All right. This is a little intimidating in terms of having to ask this to the former Diageo head mixologist. But what's your favorite cocktail? And if you don't have a favorite of all time, what's something you've been more recently obsessed with?
All right, so this is actually a two-part. So my favorite cocktail is a martini, but like that's like at the end of every day, I have a gin martini with my husband Philip. And that's like my favorite. But if I'm on my roof or on my terrace or my balcony, as I like to call them, which is my fire escape, I will say I like something a little more tropical, and I drink daiquiris. So a Copalli daiquiri on my terrace.
Very, very nice. What's your martini ratio? Are you 2-to-1? Are you a 4-to-1? What's your spec?
2.5 ounces of a London dry gin, half an ounce of a dry vermouth, a couple of dashes of orange bitters, and depending on the day, some days I'm a twist, some days I like my onions. So but yeah, that is my proportions of choice.
I love it. I love it. Beautiful. If you were a cocktail ingredient, what would you be and why?
Bitters. I would totally be bitters because bitters are the most versatile. They come in so many different flavors. You know, it's like you need a whole bunch of them. You can transform any drink just by a couple of dashes. Like bitters to me are like the perfect wardrobe. It's like you just have to have the right assortment of stuff and you can transform any day or any cocktail in this chance. So bitters.
All right. Cocktail with anybody in the world, past or present, who would it be? Where would you go? What would you drink? Just kind of paint us a picture.
Okay, so if I could have a drink with anybody, past or present, I would have a drink. My favorite person is Trevor Noah. I adore Trevor Noah. I love his background. I love where he came from. If you ever read his book called "I Was Born a Crime," I love his nuances, like of how he talks about current news, but brings some nuance to it and brings some levity to it. So I would love to just sit with him at his house, you know, or if he has like an outdoors, like on some chairs, a bucket of beer and a bottle of like really good reposado tequila, and just drink shots of that and drink beer and just shoot the shit for hours. I'd be very happy.
Very nice. Yeah. Trevor Noah, that's a new one, but certainly a great choice. All right, moving on. What's a common or traditional cocktail ingredient that you've never tasted and why?
I'll be honest with you, I read that, I was like, I think I've tasted them all. So I'm like, what's a common ingredient that I wouldn't have tasted? I went through like lists and I'm like, no, like guava, like I hate guava. So it is a common ingredient. I have tasted it, but I don't ever want to use it. And I really hate Fernet. So I don't know if this counts, but yeah, that's one I do not use in cocktails ever. So, but I've drank everywhere in the world. There's really few things I've never tasted.
I know. I'm getting more and more people where it's just like, I got to change this question because everybody's had everything.
I really struggled with it. I was like, I really have had everything. I probably should have sent you a note, but I was just like, I could just tell you I've drank everything. And what I don't like drinking is I hate any cocktails with Fernet in them. So there you go. So that's a common cocktail ingredient.
Well, maybe this one will be a little easier to answer. What is an unusual or controversial view or belief that you hold in the spirits and cocktail space?
I know this is also a struggle for me, but okay. So many people probably would have an option with it. So I really believe, especially I believed it before COVID happened and I believe it now. It's like, I think even cocktail bars, I believe in the consumer, and the consumer wants what they want. So I do believe in elevating their experience, like in a cocktail bar, and providing them unique cocktails. But we've all been in the cocktail bar where the guy next to you, like he looks at the menu, he's so overwhelmed and he just orders a vodka soda because he doesn't know. So the same thing is happening. There's now all these hard seltzers there in the marketplace. So I do believe that bars should have a menu of canned cocktails and hard seltzers. Now everybody has to-go cocktails. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about like having like one or two White Claws on your menu, picking out, some tequila sodas, some canned cocktails, and just having a small menu, like 6. And I think it's easy. It's simple. You just bang them out in the bar. You can send them with your drinks. No muss, no fuss. The consumer wants them. But I think a lot of people would be like, yeah, no, that's just not our style.
Yeah, it's interesting because most cocktail bars wouldn't blink twice at having like a sort of domestic lager on their menu. So the question would be like, why? Do you feel threatened? You think the Truly is gonna threaten your cocktail program? That's an interesting take. I'll have to think about that because I am sort of a troll when it comes to RTDs. I'm the guy at ADI who says, no, this tastes like aspartame. Why are you saying it's crushable? On the other hand, your take is very interesting. So I'm going to have to think about that and maybe revise my own views. So thank you for that take.
Well, and if you're curious, I have a Instagram account called Ready to Drink Life, and I review canned cocktails every week, like hard seltzers and canned cocktails. So I have a very distinct view about this. But yeah, so I just my view. Controversial, but there you go.
Beautiful. Well, Elayne, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you for sharing, obviously, all of the amazing work that Copalli is doing in both liquid and sort of philanthropic form. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And could you just, as we sign off here, give people all the ways to find you in the digital space, including, of course, your podcast?
Yeah, so thank you. I'd love to. So you can find me on Instagram. I have my @DuffOnTheRocks Instagram account. You can follow me there. I also have my website called duffontherocks.com. And then I also have my podcast, which I do weekly with Jason Luttrell, called The Industry Distills, which you can find if you want to see our faces. We're on Facebook Live. We record it every week, but anywhere our podcast is. And then if you are into canned cocktails and hard seltzers, I review them weekly at Ready to Drink Life. So that's where you find me.
Beautiful. Well, Elayne, once again, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is really a lot of fun.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, there's 2 big things you can do for us here at Modern Bar Cart. One would be to tell your friends and family if you think they'd enjoy listening to us talk about cocktails. And if they don't download podcasts, they can always stream our episodes on their desktop directly from the show notes page at modernbarcart.com. The other thing you can do to help would be to head on over to iTunes or wherever you download your podcasts and leave us a review. 5 stars are great, but we're more interested in your feedback. And the beauty is, the more reviews we have, the easier it will be for other folks out there to learn about our show. We're trying to start a cocktail revolution here, and by spreading the word, you're helping us fight the good fight. You can always reach us by emailing podcast@modernbarcart.com if you're looking for cocktail or bartending advice, or if you're a pro who would like to pull up a mic and be interviewed for all to hear. Also, definitely follow us on Instagram and Facebook @modernbarcart for cocktail porn, recipes, and entertaining tips. And keep an eye out for new product releases and special offers, which are happening all the time. We love our listeners, and we really enjoy giving you exclusive discounts and sneak peeks at our latest and greatest cocktail projects. This episode may be over, but for you, the mixological fun and adventures are just beginning. So remember, folks, drink responsibly and experiment boldly.
This episode was made possible with editing and production assistance by Samantha Reed, excellent rum and sustainability insights courtesy of Elayne Duff and Copalli Rum, and a little bit of interview magic by yours truly. This has been a Modern Bar Cart production, copyright 2020.